leading across capitalism, socialism, communism, etc., and really saw the same problems everywhere. And that really piqued my interest. And when I decided to leave the corporate world and focus on the problems I saw, and I just love people's problems, and how what prevents people from doing beautiful work and doing their best. And I was initially very curious about why people in those very diverse countries would have the same problems. I would think like Japanese people and people in China and France and US and Poland would have different problems, but it seems the same. And so I started my own digging and really came up with this understanding that it's a subconscious assumption that humans are only as good as what we achieve and we have. And I make a very strong statement that we all have that. If we have gone to a school or a university where there's reward and punishment, that's been embedded in our subconscious minds, and we're using it whether we realize it or not. And so when I lived in San Francisco and I worked with a lot of social impact people who seemed that they were able to focus businesses on what people really needed, I was wondering why are they getting tripping up here or things like that. And I just deduced this over time and, working with NLP and coaching and trying to understand the subconscious mind, my own self, I came up with this understanding. It's really for me to try to say, what is happening here? And so then when I started using that, and I asked my clients, okay, if you saw your board of directors staff or group or your staff or your boss or anyone as a person, instead of as the title, you expect to do this, you expect would treat you this way, you should be treated with respect, blah, blah, blah. What would you do? And then everyone knew exactly what to do. So I didn't have to focus on the leadership development I was seeing in the corporate world. Behavior. But wait, if you feel frustrated, how is your behavior going to be something more enlightening, right? It's going to reflect your frustration. So I came up with easy ways for people to start understanding their own mindsets, which I call thought, feeling, behavior. Understand what are they assuming about people. And when we started changing that assumption, everything else started being very easy. And so I started codifying it. And one of the toolkits I sent Laureen is a packet of toolkit of what is human-centric leading. I call it, we look at needs, like what do we need to feel resourceful and do better? How do we get through our emotions or use them as data so that we don't sit in frustration or anger or resentment or disgust or anything? If we are getting caught in I'm right, you're wrong, we could go to the Acropolis and get ourselves out of some emotional contagion that might hook us. And we use these little triangles as triads to understand what mindset am I bringing to a problem or a solution. And then what we as a team, what are we bringing? What mindset do we live in? Like when we're arguing or fighting or proving ourselves and all this stuff. So it's now then we're creating a little book to describe our journey. Like, how did we come to this? Why do we bother writing another leadership book amidst thousands or hundreds of thousands? And really trying to be part of the movement of people like all of you who are going toward the path of the humanization process instead of the Industrial Revolution 4.0, which I see is going toward robotics.
I see Karen nodding. I'm saying, Karen, right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm landing in the same space from a different, having arrived in a different direction, because I sort of started in the relationship space. And you said you're familiar with Imago.
I've heard of it. No, I can't say I would be able to say more about it. No, I'm not that familiar, but I've heard of it and I'm aware that it exists.
Good. So Imago is 30 years of history doing couples relationship work.
Okay.
And just recently started training what they're calling facilitators, and they're still figuring out exactly what all that means. But for me, what it means is taking that 30 years of knowledge about how people relate and what happens when people are passionate and invested and all of that, and with other people, and how that plays out, and applying it to relationships outside of the marriage or the romance world, because in fact, the way we relate is the way we relate. And there are some unique things about romantic relationships, but overall, these patterns of all the childhood wounds that show up and all of that stuff that gets in your way. Drama. Yes. It's all very similar. And so this knowledge base that exists of this 30 years of work in the relationship realm, and I particularly am interested in applying it to groups that are already interested in relationships. So I work with co-housing communities as my primary client base. I'm interested in nonprofits that's the link with sociocracy, people who are wanting to get out of the hierarchical into the more collaborative space. This is the stuff they trip over, right? So they have this intention. And I feel like what I'm hearing from you is that you came from a world where there wasn't even any intention to be in relationship, right? We're just trying to get the work done and realizing, oh, if we're going to get the work done, we have to get the relationships right to some extent underneath it, right? Yeah. And I kind of go from the other side of people who are saying we want to be in relationship, we're tripping all over ourselves, and in fact, the work gets in the way of the relationships all the time, right? Because we're trying to build a community or we're trying to do whatever it is. And so I feel like there's this sort of synergistic of coming from two different directions, but landing in the same space where relationship skills and getting work done are very much merged. And I think that working together is one of the strongest ways to build relationships.
Yeah.
So the work and the relational pieces fit, and the productivity and the relational pieces fit. And the piece that I think Imago brings that I'm extremely interested in is that I think that the work that you're talking about, where people learn how to figure out where their emotions are getting in the way and figure out how to use those emotions productively and all of that, I think it results in growth.
Yeah.
And that ultimately that is our human prerogative, right? We're like, that's what we're trying to do as people always, is to grow and to become. And that we do that better when we're deeply engaged with other humans, that the people around us are our absolute best tools for becoming who we're meant to be.
Yeah. And treated with respect, right? I mean, I see that at work, but it happens at home too. It's like we're treated as, if you can't deliver this, if you can't to help me feel this, then I question your worthiness, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you really landed that, how our educational system and the culture, I mean, we pass it on from parent to child, but also systemically, we pass it on through our education system, this value around what you can produce, what you know, and a real dismissiveness of what you feel, what you need, your personhood. Like it's so, and then we bring those expectations into whatever realm we land in.
Yes.
So I think there's a lot of synergy, and I'm always excited to see the two different perspectives, because I feel like then that's learning space of, but Imago, you were describing having put together tools and structures, and that's very much what Imago is. I mean, the concept of Imago is that what's lacking is not good intention or care or love or compassion. What's lacking is the skill set. Yeah. And Imago really is a tools package of things you can do to get those relationships landed.
Thank you. You know, one thing I learned from this conference is someone said something that I think is very bright. It's not skill, it's identity. It's like the identity diversity, because they're talking about diversity, like not, you have to even have a different identity to create diversity. And I like that more than you need different skills, you know? So it's interesting how we learn new words to describe ourselves and what we really need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah. John?
So the way I've come at all this is quite different. I have come at it from a structural standpoint. So early on, when I had a nice job as a technical writer at Boeing, which was a good job, and I had liked the people I was with, it hit me that I was not working in a democracy, and I couldn't vote for my boss. And so I said, I don't know why you can't run a business as a democracy since it's supposed to be so good. And I knew from history that like up till 1850, the men in the U.S. Army used to elect their officers, and so that's the instinctive American way. And spent a number of years looking for somebody who was running a business as a democracy. Did a lot of research. Ended up working for the Federal Aviation Administration in computer-based training. Very successful there. Was over in Holland to give a speech about it, and was talking with the people hosting us there, saying I couldn't find anybody that was running democratically. Co-ops were not, when you dug into things, they weren't. And we just lost Eleni.
But I didn't know that whole story.
Oh, you didn't? I was talking with them, complaining about this, and they said, oh, the problem's been solved. Go see Gerard Endenberg down in Rotterdam. So I did. And he had solved the problem. He was an electronics engineer by training, had parents who before World War II were super liberal socialists. After World War II, after they'd survived it, they decided that they didn't like the way socialism was developing in Europe, so they set themselves up as capitalists and their own business. And the company's still running today. It's Endenberg Electrotechnique. It does heavy wiring, heavy electrical wiring. And when Gerard's parents decided to retire, he took over the company. And he said when he took it over, the first thing he did was asked to see the power structure, and he looked at it. It was the typical top-down thing. And he said, as an electronics engineer, I would never design a power structure that way. For one thing, it has no feedback loop. And from there, he developed a system that, in fact, allows you to vote for your boss. It's governance both top-down and bottom-up. When you go in and set up a company this way, you change the bylaws. And the reason I didn't go into organizational development or the kind of work you're talking about, although I find it really interesting, is that nobody in that field was talking about changing bylaws and changing the structure of power that was, I think, contributes to creating the problems that you're trying to solve. So I studied sociocracy very thoroughly, learned enough Dutch to translate some of the stuff he had. Then recently I've written another book that embeds sociocracy in a larger framework of different methods beyond budgeting, open space, sociocracy, and agile, which is why I was at the Agile conference there. And it's dealing with complexity, and that circles back around to what you're talking about. Are you familiar with the work by Ralph Stacey on complexity?
No.
Okay, so what you're talking about that which is the true place of complexity is people talking with each other without a preset framework that they're supposed to be working in. And so the work you're doing is very important. And so I get to that by way of structure.
Wonderful. So context, I would call that context.
Maybe. It's context. The context is a very powerful influence on how people behave.
Oh, yeah.
And so you can train them with skills and so forth, but you also need to adapt the structure so that you're not setting people up to be la 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 la, we're getting along well, and then they decide to sell the company.
Yeah. Or ask people to be innovative and then measure profit on
Right.
short-term profit.
Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with the business roundtable statement?
Yes. We read about that and we were like, okay, I'll take it on a symbolic level. We'll see.
Right.
But I like, I don't know if you saw that Bob Chapman wrote them a letter too and said, we did it. So if you want advice, call us, So upping the ante and asking people to really deliver instead of just talk.
Yeah, I've been poking in the same direction, and we found that even people in the communications department didn't even know about the statement.
Oh, no.
We poked into that level in 2 or 3
Wow.
of the companies that were signatories, and they had no idea that it had been signed or anything else. So
Okay. So that's okay. It has to be at the word level instead, and then hopefully at one point it becomes a real intention.
So I'm curious to know the similarities and differences between what you're doing and what they do with Imago. And by the way,
okay.
I've got a major thing I'm doing at 2:00, and I thought I was going to have more time to prepare, so I need to get off in about another 15 minutes. I can't spend the whole hour.
Okay.
Then can I make a suggestion? Rather than doing that, I would suggest you talk about place-based communities of practice, because Eleni's been doing a lot, and if that's an interest of yours, you might want to have a sense of what's in place or not. Let me just check in with you, John. But like Karen and John, like based on what I heard your interest in, like that was the second reason why Eleni. Like one was the connection between the content, but the second is like the delivery method and communities of practice. So you guys decide, but I would just propose that.
I'm not sure
Okay,
what
John.
place-based communities of practice is. I don't know what that is.
Karen, did I misunderstand you, or did you, like, I feel like I got that from you, no?
I think we're just in different language.
Okay.
The place-based thing, I'm not sure that part. But the concept of communities of practice, I mean, I feel like that's spreading pretty broadly. It's certainly Imago's talking about it, but this idea that there is this new way of being, whether, you know, it's human-centered, it's emotionally aware, it's relationship-focused, and that new way of being requires us to grow into it, and that we do that best in collaboration with others. So this idea of a community of practice, that I can't just by myself become expert at what I need to be successful in this space, but that what I need is a group of people to do that with. And it's not just about signing on with a leader who's going to hand down the wisdom. It's about that collaborative community, peer-based space. That's what I think of as a community of practice, where we come together and talk about what we're doing and share ideas and give support and, you know, those kinds of things. So that's what I'm thinking of. And I think we're not very good at creating them. And so that's what John and I had sort of attempted to put together, a workshop that would intentionally create a community of practice for the participants, with the idea being that we could support some, but that really the idea is that community of practice would go live on without us, that it would be its own thing. So that's, I think, what you're leaning into, Lorraine. So I'm curious.
Yes. Yeah, because Eleni's really into, like, so just, yeah, that is what I wanted to lean into, or I wanted to suggest you might want to lean into, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Eleni, what you've got going.
What we do is we created something called The Hub, and it's a place where we come and talk about a lot of things that nobody talks about, like the taboos of, am I really scared of change, or do I just don't want to feel out of control? Am I, is the role of myself as a man or woman limiting me, and I don't even know it? It's really awareness, like increasing awareness, and also talking about things that we believe are preventing people from being innovative, open, collaborative, developing deep relationships, and this like. And so we have monthly events, and we either use sociocratic circles or social justice circles, or what I called speed leading, like anything to have fun or to make it easy for each person to hear themselves and each other without being spoken like in the chaotic, like spoken over or questioned or things like that. And so we do all types of things, but we do something every month to try to, and this is now in a pop-up version. We hope at one point we have a physical hub where people can go, like a community center that's new. Like, okay, what does the brain need? What type of food? I mean, like really trying to say, how do we get back to who we are, and how to use all of our skills instead of no logic, only logic, or no emotion, no intuition, no this, no that. And so that's what we do. And we try to bring people together in different ways to talk about, like, we wanted to detangle race. And then as a group, we decided, we don't want to say we're detangling race. We wanted to say, how are we human without labels or stereotypes? Like, what do we do if somebody labels me? How can I respond differently? Or if I have no label, then who am I? So it's really questioning how strong the labels we've been given and we maintain or give ourselves are in how we feel and how we lead and how we respond to things. And so it's really trying to change how we see humans. Like, how do I see myself? Am I only good if I'm on time, or I'm reliable, or is there more to me? Do I have inherent value? Do I matter? And then everything I do is just a function of sharing and contributing versus proving myself. And the world I live in is it's like a dystopia, or I know that's not a word, but I use it that way. Dystopic. In other words, it's people say, I don't have feelings. I don't have intuition. And so I had to go to that level of really like not trying to prove that they have emotions, but work from that level. Like, okay, some humans don't have emotions. Then how do you work with them? And so mine is like, my work is teeny tiny steps to get people back to their full selves without saying things that might make people feel out of control. So I think the way I work is to, of course, the hub is not corporate. Right now, it's just community based, but in the corporate. But I'm hoping to bring that to the corporate and say, okay, let us have these, happy hour 5 o'clock on Fridays or Thursdays for your staff to just have a new idea. So I think, yeah, that's how we do it.
Cool. John?
Just curious as to, I don't know whether you call them communities of practice or groups that continue with each other. Do you have some examples of how you've got some assembled that are operating on their own?
I don't. People I work with do not operate on their own.
So you've been more doing kind of one-time gatherings as opposed to something that will continue?
Let's say, we have some series of events but we have a hard time, at least so far. We haven't focused on, we hope we invite the same people, and some people do come over and over, but I don't think they go back. And even if they're buddied, like we have partnerships and we say, go back and work with your buddy for 1 week and things like that, we don't see that happening yet. We see someone, meeting on Thursday night when we are meeting on Friday, and like, oh, we met at Thursday at 9 and we had a drink and then we talked about, but it's like squeezing it in as a task versus really depending on each other. And so that's why we feel we're being hopeful or naive to have these, and over time people will know, okay, every month I could go there. I see the same people. We do generally the same thing, even if it's different exercises. And even now, we've been doing it since this year. So actually the first event was last November, and then we started monthly in January. And even now people are like, oh, we met for a drink, or somebody helped me have an interview. Some of that is happening, but not really on an intentional basis.
It's so interesting because I feel like I just think the power of it is evident to me. Like I really believe that connectional space is really valuable, and people are so resistant to it, or at least it's very difficult to get them to do it. And that was true,
They
even
crave it.
Yep. And that was true, like the Imago training that we do. It was 3 or 4 days at a time, 4 times through a year of deeply relational work. So we got to know each other really well, a really high trust, and some commonality of intention, right? We all signed up for this program and invested in it. And I couldn't get those groups to maintain ongoing communication as a community of practice, even with, we kind of knew each other's secrets by the end, because it had been that intensive time, and then everybody walks away.
Yeah.
And it's just fascinating.
Yeah. I see, the way I interpret it is like I would crave this, but I can't handle what I feel. That's what I've concluded, is like I can't tolerate that level of realness, only because I judge it, not because, it's like I judge it as bad, or that I'm weak, or that I haven't solved it yet. Like I have people say, I'm 50 and I'm still dealing with this, So I think we forget the power of context and how we're living in a, what I call legacy industrial model that just says you're worthless. Come on, prove yourself. Everywhere you go. I mean, this is a conference of learning leaders, and if you hear their vocabulary and their assumptions, they're back into prove myself, prove yourself. So I think that's going to be a long time. And so I think at least the way I've been able to get over my own disappointment that things don't continue is just say, okay, let it happen when it's ready to happen. And I'm the container where it could happen.
Yeah.
Now, fueling that emotionally and psychically is expensive, but so far I'm able to do it. We'll see if I continue longer. But this is my hope.
Can I lean in? Sorry. Does anyone have anything to say? I don't mean to interrupt. What about you and Brandon? I feel like you are part of a community of practice. Like maybe you haven't been able to hold it for others, but it feels like there's a flock of you, and like you guys list each other on each other's websites. Like I just saw Jenny's website. Like I feel like in a way you are part of one in a way that's really beautiful. So I just want to is there anything am I understanding it wrong, or how would you describe that?
I think we are a group of people who are hoping the same thing. But when we've tried probably for a year and a half to come up with a goal or an intention, or what are we going to pursue, or what are we going to learn, and we can't get it. And so we said we're going to be a learning community, and that was enough glue to keep us together. And then we lean on each other to talk about things, talk things out, or support each other's events. But it's also, we are at very, very different developmental phases, and so sometimes we can't connect we only can connect intellectually, not so much on a deeper level. That's what I feel. Of course, I'm far older than everyone. Everyone else is 30 years old or 34, 35. And so it could be that as well, but we still stick together.
What I find is it's very difficult to see the individualism in our culture. And I was able to see it like in a kind of like a light bulb moment, talking with one of my friends from India, who said that until he was 18, he didn't know when he was born. They never celebrated his birthday, nor did anybody in the village. Where we might celebrate an individual's birthday, they would have a village celebration. They identified as the collective. And so it's like that's how deeply we are, and it's in everything. Like I've checked to see if we could organize a neighborhood, and wanted to see if the neighborhood could do bulk buying. Well, if I've checked with behind the scenes with places like Target, and they don't even have a policy about group buying. They don't even have a concept of selling to a neighborhood. It's all sell it to individuals or maybe their families.
Yeah.
And so there's a huge edifice built around being separated, individual, and not having your identity be part of a group.
Yeah.
And so we're battling really deep cultural foundations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy we have so many problems, because it really gives us time to question what is wrong, and so a lot of people are able to see, wow, a lot of the systems we've created are just finished, and what we don't have the new ones yet, so we have to swim in murky water for a while. And so the way I have perceived that is okay, what helps someone swim in that murky water? To be able to say, I can feel powerful without proving what I did specifically. It's mixed in this group. I don't know what I did, but I did my best. I helped others. So even defining success and defining one's identity is so individualistic that, for me, it's an identity issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it as power. It's how do our power has been defined as who can you get to do something? Mm-hmm. Who can you influence? Who can you acquire? Even here at the conference, they said the company owns the human resources. Okay. We're supposed to be talking beyond that. So who owns who, right? We're still in this way of thinking. And now that, even the president of the United States with the highest position power can't get stuff done because these things are cracking. And so I think if now we have to say, where does our power come from then? If I can't use my position power or my prestige or my money, what do we do? And I think that's the only reason that I exist now in this work, is because people are starting to see, yeah, it's not working. The hierarchy, I come here, I'm the CEO, I tell everyone, and then they push back. We heard even of the Mayo Clinic. They have a very positive culture, which is very open, but it's very prove it. So this new CEO came in saying, we're going to all be innovative. But everyone says, but how can you be innovative? I've lived my life as an MD, PhD, proving every step with evidence-based, and then I submit my articles, and he's like, CEO doesn't know how to influence. So I think everybody's learning this at their own level. And this is why we have so much frustration and anxiety. And I use that as an opening. I'm like, are you anxious? Good. Oh, that's
Right.
a drawer. It's not because you're not smart. It's not because you're not good. It's not because you failed. It's because of the context and what we're doing and. So I follow Mother Nature. Mother Nature is gracious enough to create pain, and we have to respond to it.
Yeah. I do the same thing with conflict.
Yeah.
You're in conflict?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Here's this opportunity.
Yeah. So we're at the 15-minute mark, I think, even over. Should we reconvene at another time, or?
You all can keep talking. I need to go. I've made Karen and Lorraine co-hosts.
Okay.
I would like to explore this further. It sounds like similar and different, which is always interesting. And the rest of this week is wiped out for me, but I could meet, the week of the 16th or the 23rd to continue. It would be good to do it sooner than later so we don't lose the thread of our thoughts.
Okay, I'm using my phone, so I can't look at the calendar, but we could email each other maybe those 2 dates, or text each other, or I'll just remember them, 16th and 23rd. What time works for you?
Those are the weeks of.
Oh, the weeks. Okay, we'll find some time. We'll do a doodle.
I'm going to let you all continue on. I'm going to just leave the meeting. What do I have to